Hey, my name is Evan. I'm 31 and I fix things for people who can afford to have them fixed right. 3 months ago, I was closing up my studio above Pine Street Cafe when my wealthy, married client's wife appeared in my doorway. The scent of her perfume mixed with lemon cleaner and espresso rising through the floorboards as I joked, "Do you want to live with me?" The next morning, she stood there with red eyes, holding a small bag, and whispered, "Is your offer still up?" What happened next pulled me into the kind of slow burn that changes everything while pretending to change nothing. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments, because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I never meant for any of it to happen. That's what I tell myself now, sitting here in the amber light of my studio apartment, the smell of lemon cleaner and espresso drifting up through the floorboards. But the truth is, I think I knew from the first moment I saw her standing in that glass house on the hill, studying my renovation plans like they held secrets. My name is Evan Hart. I'm 31 and I fix things for people who can afford to have them fixed right. Custom trim work, built-ins, the kind of details that make rich people feel like their money bought them something special. I work alone, live alone, in a one-room studio above Pine Street Cafe in the old part of town where the rent is still reasonable and the coffee is strong. The Vale job came to me through a referral. Charles Vale, venture capitalist, glass and stone house overlooking the valley. His wife wanted the piano room redone, crown molding, wainscoting, something about the acoustics, the kind of work that pays my bills for 3 months. I remember that first evening consultation, October getting cold early. Charles did his walkthrough with me, all business, firm handshake, expensive watch, the kind of man who shook hands like he was closing deals. "Timeline's flexible," he said, checking his phone. "Isabel has the final say on design." That's when I saw her. She was standing by the piano, a baby grand with the lid locked down, wearing a cream sweater that probably cost more than my truck payment. Dark hair pulled back, silver at the temples she didn't try to hide. Beautiful in that way that money can't buy, the kind that comes from good bones and careful living. But her tea was sitting untouched on the windowsill, cold. "Mrs. Vale?" I said, extending my hand. "I'm Evan." Her handshake was soft but deliberate. "Isabel, thank you for coming." She studied my sketches longer than necessary, asked questions about the wood grain, the finish, whether the new molding would change how sound moved through the room. Smart questions, the kind that meant she actually cared about the answers. Teresa, their housekeeper, offered me tea. Late 50s, gray hair in a careful bun, eyes that missed nothing. She moved through that house like she'd been there forever, straightening things that were already straight. "Sugar?" she asked. "Just milk, thanks." Isabel looked up from the plans. "He takes it like I do." Such a small thing. But Charles was already heading to his office, phone pressed to his ear, and for just a moment it felt like the three of us, me, Isabel, Teresa, were the only real people in that museum of good taste. I measured trim for an hour. Isabel stayed nearby, not hovering, just present. When I knelt to check baseboards, I caught her perfume, green fig with something powdery underneath, the kind of scent that stays with you. As I packed my tools, she asked about my studio. "It's above the cafe on Pine Street," I said. "Nothing fancy, just a place to work and sleep." "Do you like living downtown?" "I like the sounds," I said. "Coffee machines in the morning, people talking on the sidewalk. Feels alive." She nodded like she understood what I meant, like maybe her glass house got too quiet sometimes. I drove home thinking about locked piano lids and cold tea, about the way she'd said he takes it like I do, like we shared some small secret. The next morning, Noah Chen brought me day-old croissants from downstairs. Noah owned Pine Street Cafe, 33 and soft-spoken, The kind of guy who remembered everyone's order and never judged anyone for drinking coffee at 10 p.m. New client? He asked, setting the bag on my drafting table. House on the hill. Piano room. Fancy. Yeah. I bit into a croissant, still warm. Fancy. I spent the day sketching details, sourcing materials, normal work, but around 5, when the light was getting golden and I was thinking about dinner, footsteps climbed the stairs to my studio. Soft footsteps, expensive shoes. Isabel stood in my doorway wearing a different sweater, navy blue this time, and carrying a small purse like she'd just come from somewhere important. I was nearby, she said, which we both knew wasn't quite true. The cafe was downtown, her house was in the hills, and there wasn't much in between except the used bookstore and a dry cleaner. Come in, I said, because what else do you say? My studio is one room with good light and a Murphy bed that stays folded most of the time. Drafting table by the window, small kitchen along one wall, couch that's seen better days but still holds your weight. The kind of place where everything has to earn its space. She looked around without judgment, touched the corner of my drafting table where I'd been sketching her molding profiles. You draw by hand, she said. Old school, computers are great, but sometimes you need to feel the lines. We talked about trim details, wood stains, the way different finishes caught light, safe topics, professional topics. But underneath, something else was building. The kind of tension that makes you aware of how close you're standing, how her perfume mingles with the smell of cedar shavings and coffee drifting up from below. It was getting dark. Time for her to go. Time for both of us to step back from whatever edge we were approaching. That's when I said it. Do you want to live with me? The words came out half joking, the way you deflect something serious by making it sound casual, the way you test dangerous water with your toe. She looked at me for a long moment, smiled in a way that wasn't quite a smile. Good night, Evan. After she left, I found her scarf draped over my chair, silk, the color of winter sky, still warm from her neck. I should have called her, should have driven to that glass house and handed it back with an apology for the inappropriate joke, should have kept things professional. Instead, I held it to my face and breathed in green fig and powder and something indefinably her. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, early, before Noah had even opened the cafe, I drove toward the Vale house with the scarf folded on my passenger seat. But when I got to their hill, their long driveway, their iron gate with the intercom, I kept driving. Coward, I circled back to downtown, parked behind the cafe, climbed the back stairs to my studio, made coffee with shaking hands, and told myself I was being ridiculous. One inappropriate comment, one forgotten scarf, nothing to lose sleep over. At 8:12 a.m., Isabel stood in my doorway. Her eyes were red, not crying red, but tired red, the kind that comes from staring at ceilings all night. Is your offer still up? She asked. I stepped back. She stepped in. I closed the door and put the kettle on because that's what you do when someone shows up at your door looking like they've been walking all night. Are you okay? I don't know. She sat on my couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. I don't think I've been okay in a very long time. I made tea, Earl Grey, the only kind I had. We sat on opposite ends of the couch and worked out the rules without really discussing them. Daylight visits only. No staying past sunset. No touching. No questions she didn't want to answer. I just need somewhere to breathe, she said. You can breathe here. She curled into the corner of my couch and closed her eyes. Within 10 minutes, she was asleep. I worked quietly, sketching and measuring while she napped. The piano from the dance studio next door filtered through the walls, muffled scales and half-remembered melodies, the kind of music that makes you think of things you've lost. Around 4, she stirred, stretched like a cat, looked around my studio like she was remembering where she was. I should go. Okay. She folded the blanket I draped over her legs. left it neat and precise on the couch cushion. Then she took her scarf from where I'd hung it on the back of my chair and draped it over my drafting stool instead. Deliberate, purposeful. "Thank you," she said. After she left, I sat staring at that scarf for an hour. Silk against pine, wood, money against sweat equity. Everything that shouldn't go together but somehow did. That evening, Noah locked up the cafe and stopped by my studio with leftover soup. "You have company?" he asked, nodding at the two mugs in my sink. "Temporary," I said. He didn't push. That was Noah's way. He saw everything, judged nothing, spoke only when words were needed. But I caught him looking at me differently. The way you look at someone who's standing closer to a cliff edge than they realize. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Isabel would arrive after lunch, sometimes with a pastry she couldn't finish, sometimes with nothing but an apology for showing up again. We'd make tea, sit on opposite ends of the couch, talk about safe things, music, books, the way afternoon light moved across downtown rooftops. She told me she used to play piano, concert level, before college, before marriage, before her life became a series of charity functions and board meetings. "Why did you stop?" "Charles doesn't like the sound, says it carries too much." I thought about that locked lid, that pristine bench with its perfect cushion. A piano turned into furniture. "You could play here," I said. "The studio next door has an old upright. I'm sure they'd let you." "No. Quick. Definite. This is enough. Just this." The this was us sitting 3 feet apart on a secondhand couch, sharing tea and careful conversation while rain ticked against the cafe awning below. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that would make headlines or break marriages, but it felt more intimate than anything I'd ever experienced. Friday came with real rain, the kind that starts early and commits to lasting all day. I was supposed to do a site check at the Vale House, review measurements, talk timeline with Charles. When I showed up in my work jeans, paint splattered, broken in, real. Charles's eyebrow lifted just enough to remind me which side of the class line I lived on. "Timeline's looking good," I said, reviewing my notes. "Trim should be ready next week." "Excellent." He signed an invoice without looking at the amount. Pocket change to him, rent money to me. Teresa appeared as I was leaving, passed me a paper towel for my hands like she was helping me clean up for company. "Thank you," I said. She nodded once. Understanding passed between us without words. Teresa saw everything in that house. The cold tea, the locked piano, the careful distance between husband and wife. She knew about breathing room and the people who needed it. That evening, when rain trapped Isabel at my studio past her usual departure time, we listened to the piano scales bleeding through the wall and shared my jacket when the heat kicked on late. She tried to give it back. I told her to keep it until the rain stopped. She folded it and set it on the coffee table between us, untouched, but acknowledged. "Thank you for the sound," she texted after making it home. Such a simple message, but I read it 20 times before falling asleep. The next week, everything shifted. Isabel arrived Tuesday with a small envelope. Inside was a copy of my lobby key, the one that opened the street door to the stairs leading up to my studio. "I panicked," she said, setting it on my counter between the lemon cleaner and cedar shavings. "About being locked out if I needed to." Breathe. I could have said no, should have said no. Having a key meant planning, intention, a level of trust that crossed lines we'd been careful not to cross. Instead, I let it sit there. She noticed I didn't take it back. We folded laundry together that afternoon. Her sweaters mixed with my work shirts in the basket from the laundromat downstairs. Domestic and strange and perfect. When thunder cracked outside, she startled and leaned into me, just for a second, forehead against my shoulder, breath warm against my neck. I stopped first, pulled back, kept the rules we'd made. She nodded, grateful for the stop, grateful that one of us was strong enough to remember why the rules mattered. but when she left at sunset, the key stayed on the counter. That night, Charles dropped by my studio. No warning, no appointment, just footsteps on the stairs and a knock at my door. "Charles," I said, opening up, "is everything okay? Thought I'd take a look at your setup, see where the magic happens." Except Isabel was in my bathroom, hiding behind a door that didn't quite latch, probably holding her breath while her husband stood 3 feet away, examining my tile samples. "Nice space," Charles said, taking his time, looking at everything: the key on my counter, the 2 mugs in the sink, the silk scarf draped over my drafting stool. "Thanks. It's small, but it works." He left his business card on my table. Crisp white cardstock with embossed lettering. His way of saying, "I was here. I saw everything." After his car pulled away, Isabel emerged from the bathroom shaking. I made tea. The kettle sang us both back to calm. But something had changed. We'd almost been caught. The game was getting dangerous, and games like this one didn't end well for people like me. The next morning, Lila texted me from an unknown number. "We need to talk." Lila waited for me at a corner table in the cafe after closing, still wearing her courthouse clothes: navy blazer, pearls, the armor of old money. Isabel's sister, but harder around the edges. The kind of woman who'd learned to protect what mattered by seeing threats before they materialized. "You're him," she said without preamble. "I'm him." Noah had left us alone, disappeared into the back with inventory sheets and the wisdom to make himself scarce. The espresso machine hissed softly in the quiet. "Do you know what a headline costs?" Lila asked. "No, ma'am." "Everything." She leaned forward. "Isabel sits on 4 boards. Charles underwrites political campaigns. One photo, one rumor, one bitter ex-employee with a story to sell, and it's over. Not just for her, for everyone who depends on their name staying clean." I nodded. I'd figured as much. That said, Lila's voice softened. She's had color in her cheeks for the first time in years. She hums again. "Teresa noticed. It's not what you think. I know exactly what it is." Lila studied me with eyes like her sister's, but sharper. "You're giving her something Charles never could: permission to be human. The question is whether you're smart enough not to ask for more." "I'm not asking for anything." "You don't have to ask. She's already giving it." Lila stood to leave, then turned back. "If you hurt her, I will end you." "But—" She paused. "Thank you for her color." After she left, I sat in the dark cafe surrounded by the smell of coffee beans and possibility. Outside, Pine Street was quiet except for the occasional car and the soft buzz of streetlights coming on. I'd been naive to think we were invisible. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone's business. The only question was who would talk and who would look the other way. The week of the charity gala, everything accelerated. The Vale House hummed with activity. Florists, caterers, event coordinators speaking in hushed, urgent voices. I worked around them, installing crown molding while men in expensive suits discussed table arrangements and wine pairings. Isabel floated through it all like a practiced ghost, directing traffic with quiet efficiency, solving problems before they became crises, playing the role she'd been born to play. But when she passed me in the hallway, our eyes met for half a second and I saw the exhaustion underneath the performance. She didn't come to the studio that day, or the next. I sat on my couch alone, phone face down on the coffee table, screen black except for my reflection. The silence felt different without her breathing across the room. Heavier, more final. Thursday morning, everything imploded. Society Spotlight, a gossip blog that fed off charity circuit drama, published a blurry photo of Isabel walking near Pine Street. The caption read, "Noted philanthropist Isabel Vale spotted in Bohemian downtown district, expanding her charitable interests." The photo was innocent enough, just her walking down a sidewalk, but the comment section exploded with speculation, innuendo, and the kind of vicious social media pile-on that ruins lives for entertainment. By noon, I'd received 3 polite cancellations from other clients needing to pause their projects. Word traveled fast in certain circles. At the Vale House, Charles smiled too much and spoke in careful, measured sentences. Important to keep receipts, he said, signing my latest invoice. Documentation, paper trails, never know when you might need them. The threat was gentle, but clear. Teresa met me at the side door as I was leaving, slipped fresh lemons into my tool bag without explanation. For tea, she whispered. That night, I drove aimlessly through the hills, counting porch lights like prayer beads. I found the Vales street, counted their neighbors' illuminated windows twice, then drove on because stopping would have been stalking and we'd crossed enough lines already. At 2:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. I can't come anymore. I'm sorry. I typed 3 different responses and deleted them all. Finally sent, I'll leave the light on. Before sunrise, I changed the bulb on my studio porch to an amber one. The old white light had been practical, efficient. The amber one was warmer, softer, the kind of light that said welcome instead of beware. It buzzed softly when the wind hit it just right. 2 days later, I threw myself into work, sanding trim until my hands went numb, cutting joints so precise they disappeared into themselves. Physical labor that quieted the part of my brain that kept replaying her voice, her laugh, the way she folded that blanket with careful, deliberate hands. Noah brought soup and said nothing. The dance studio's piano played an old waltz that made me think of locked lids and possibilities that would never open. That evening, I drove to the Vale House with her scarf folded in my pocket, left it on their gate's intercom at dusk, weighted down with a small stone so it wouldn't blow away. By morning, it was gone. The intercom's red LED glowed like a watching eye. Gala night arrived with social media glamour shots and carefully curated perfection. Charles and Isabel smiled for cameras, posed with donors, played their parts flawlessly. The kind of evening where every photo was a small performance and every conversation had 3 layers of meaning. I kept my phone face down and traced molding profiles on scrap MDF, muscle memory and meditation combined. Around 10 p.m., Teresa called from what sounded like a service corridor. Pantry door is sticking, she said. Could you take a look? When I arrived at the house, the gala was in full swing. Valets, string quartet, women in gowns that cost more than my truck. I slipped through the kitchen entrance like I belonged there. The pantry door was fine. Teresa just wanted to say something away from ears that might repeat conversations. Protect yourself, she whispered, pretending to cough when Charles's voice carried from the main hall. I left through the kitchen, the clatter of chafing dishes masking my exit. In my truck, driving home through empty streets, I wondered how many other people were playing roles they'd never chosen, keeping up appearances that slowly strangled them. The morning after the gala, Lila waited on the cafe stoop before Noah opened. Hair unbrushed, makeup free, more real than I'd ever seen her. I told her to stop coming, she said without preamble. Okay. It almost killed me to do it, but Charles is asking questions, and questions become investigations, and investigations become headlines. She looked up at my studio window. Can you survive being the porch light only? The place she knows she could go but doesn't? I thought about it, really thought about it. Yeah, I said. I think I can. Good. Lila squeezed my hand once. Because some people need to know safe places exist, even if they never use them. She disappeared into a rideshare like a decision already made. 7 ordinary days passed, the kind of week that feels like a held breath, work and coffee and rain and the growing certainty that some chapters close without dramatic endings, just silence. I fixed a crooked cabinet, replaced a squeaky hinge, learned to cook an omelet that wouldn't embarrass me if someone was watching. Every night, I flipped the porch light on at dusk and off at dawn, a rhythm, a promise to no one in particular. Noah stopped asking about my company. The dance studio piano played its scales. Teresa texted updates about door hinges and filter replacements. Her way of staying connected without saying names that shouldn't be said. Friday night, as the kettle hissed toward boiling, I heard it. A soft rasp against my door, fabric against wood. Then, silence. I opened the door to find her scarf hanging from the knob, still warm, still carrying the scent of green fig and something indefinably her. No one stood in the hallway. I brought the scarf inside, draped it over the chair where she'd first left it, and made tea I didn't drink. My phone stayed face down on the table. No calls, no texts, just the amber light buzzing softly in the evening breeze. Saturday afternoon, Teresa called about a replacement filter. Doors don't always close, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Sometimes they breathe. She didn't say Isabel's name, didn't need to. I bought 2 filters and a bouquet of cheap grocery tulips, then sat in my truck for 20 minutes deciding not to deliver either. Some gestures were too much, some kindnesses crossed lines that needed to stay drawn. Sunday, sunset. I flipped the amber light on and settled into my evening routine. The cafe below was quiet, Noah probably at home reading or cooking something that smelled better than my frozen dinners. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, hesitant, a knuckle barely tapped against my door. Isabel stood there with no bag, no plan, just keys in her palm and an expression I couldn't quite read. I didn't pack, she said. I just walked. I stepped back. She entered. I set water to boil because rituals matter when everything else is uncertain. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, knees almost touching, and said nothing while the kettle murmured its way toward singing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, necessary. After an hour, rain began lightly against the windows. No fights, she said finally. No scene, just a quiet room after a fundraiser where I felt invisible. I walked toward the only place that felt like breath. You can breathe here? I know. She looked around my studio like she was memorizing it. But I can't stay. You know that, right? I know. We discussed the rules again. Daylight departures. No secrets that would hurt people. No touching except what kept panic from winning. She saw the return scarf, smiled in a way that reached her eyes. I kept it in my coat for weeks, she said, like a talisman. I offered the couch, the blanket, the illusion of normal domesticity. She said she'd sit until the kettle sang once more. Then go. The kettle sang. She stood, smoothed her skirt, held the doorknob, and breathed. I won't come every day, she said. I can't. But I needed to know the light was real. It will be. At 4:30 a.m., we walked down the back stairs to avoid cafe cameras. The street sweeper hummed at the corner, cleaning away the day's debris. On the sidewalk, in the space between streetlights, she stopped. Thank you, she said. For what? For not asking for more than I could give. She stepped into a waiting rideshare. I watched the taillights dissolve into rain and early morning mist. 2 days later, I returned to work at the Vale House, professional and quiet, measuring twice and cutting once, keeping conversation focused on trim joints and delivery schedules. Charles signed an invoice without meeting my eyes. Progress of a sort. Teresa passed the pantry, patted the door that now opened smoothly, nodded once in approval. Later, I found a plain note at the service entrance. Filter replaced. Thank you. Driving home through ordinary Tuesday afternoon traffic, I saw a single porch light blink twice on a side street before steadying. Could have been electrical. Could have been coincidence. Could have been someone else who understood about lights and the promises they kept. 1 week later, fell into a pattern that felt sustainable. Days filled with work, evenings that sometimes held 2 mugs, but no confessions. I learned to be content with glimpses, a text about weather, a scarf left and retrieved, the knowledge that somewhere in a glass house on a hill, someone thought about amber lights and safe places to breathe. Noah stopped asking questions he already knew the answers to. Lila nodded from across crowded lobbies. Teresa included extra lemons with her filter requests. The story could have ended there. Probably should have. But some doors, once cracked, never quite close. Dawn painted my studio floorboards in shades of gold and possibility. I stood in the doorway breathing morning air, holding a cup of coffee that was finally learning to taste right, and flipped the porch light off. Then, on again. Once, a promise, a possibility, a light left burning for someone who might need a place to breathe. You don't have to rescue someone to keep a light on. You just have to be there when morning finds them.